are photos, and I'm going to see how well you can see these. Actually, not too bad. So this is kind of a slide that helps you understand the importance of sunlight, and it was a great example. So this was 2 bushels of spring barley, was interseeded into silage corn on the 6th of September, okay? The intended harvest date of this field was the 18th of September. So that was going to be 12 days later. So we're inside that 2-week window, right? This is, by the way, 20-inch rows and about approximately 14-foot tall silage corn. So this is, people say, well, how much seed gets caught in the corn? A lot less than you'd think. The seed gets caught in the corn, don't get me wrong. But I actually had a grower once measure it, and he said it was 7%. What happened was he had 20-inch row silage corn and a diagonal blacktop driveway that went back to a house in the middle of the field. And I just left the gate on as I flew over the driveway. There was no way I could open and close it fast enough as I went over the driveway, right? So he went out with a 1 foot by 1 foot square and counted the number of seeds on the blacktop. And then he went in the field and counted, and he said there was 7% was held in the corn. So I've used that number since he did that. I thought, well, that was kind of cool that he did that. So the reason why I'm mentioning the height of the corn is that a lot of people are worried that if their corn's too big or too dense, this isn't going to work, and that's not the case. So planted on the 6th, supposed to get harvested on the 18th, right? This photo over here, look what day it was taken, on the 25th of September. Didn't get harvested on the 18th, right? So we're now 19 days after seeding. It's difficult to see here, but I'm going to describe it. The seeds are laying on the ground, they're germinated. And the leaves, it's difficult to tell from this photo, but the leaf coming off of each of those seeds is about 8 to 10 inches long. It's a super tall leaf. And the root of that spring barley plant is no more than 3/8 of an inch into the soil. Okay? That seed, that plant, is using all of its energy to grow a leaf vertically to try to compete for sunlight with the 14-foot tall corn. And it's using none of its energy to go down, right? So if the surface of the soil dries out for any period of time, this plant's just going to die. So I took this photo on the 25th. Later that day, 2 days later, the grower called me and he said, Damon, he said, we've been working really hard at harvesting silage corn. Everybody's really tired. He said, I know you said we got to do the harvest within 14 days. We're past that. He said, should we do the harvest tomorrow, which would have been the 28th, or can we wait until, I think he was going to wait till like the 1st of October. And I said, you know what, I'm going to run out there and take a look. This photo over here was taken in the same spot I took this picture. And it was taken 2 days later. And you look at how all these plants are laying over. They're in the process of dying. The surface of the soil had dried out a little bit, and they're laying over. And I said, Steve, if you want any of your cover crop left, I think you better do it tomorrow. So you can really see how quickly this plant is going from living to dying. That was 48 hours between those 2 photos. Now, these guys didn't forget to harvest their silage corn, right? The 18th didn't come along and they're like, oh, we just don't feel like doing it today. What happened was they did start harvesting on the 18th, this plant. The problem was where they harvested on the 18th, the silage was too wet. So they only took off about 15 acres. So what we're doing here now is we're standing where they actually took off the silage at the time that they had anticipated. And if you notice, a lot of these plants even have their 3rd leaf out rather than 1 leaf. They're shorter. They're only probably about 4 inches tall. And I dug up a couple of these plants. They've got roots down 5 inches. So this is a healthy plant that has had access to sunlight. So, I hope I'm doing a good job of kind of showing you. Here's in the shade, right? Not very healthy. Things aren't going real good. Here's out in the sun. And that's only a week difference between this plant right here and these plants is just 1 week of sunlight. So this sunlight thing is just really, really critical. I tell growers that I work for, because I do a lot of seeding on silage corn, I tell them, don't ask me to plant your cover crop seed until you've started your silage corn harvest. Because the silage corn harvest typically takes a couple weeks. I want to be flying over one field that's partly bare. Because otherwise we're going to have part of what we did out there for a really long period of time, and that may not be in our best interest. So that's another guideline for timing. Now, here's some photos that were taken then later in the year, right? So this is taken on the 29th of October. And remember this photo, this photo right here is, I took the photo in the same spot between the two different harvest dates. So on this side is what got harvested on the 18th of September. And look how beautiful that is. I mean, that is just gorgeous. This was harvested on the 28th. Now this is a very successful cover crop. I'm not saying that there's a problem with this cover crop, but you can see the difference in plant population, and you can also see the difference in wheel track damage from the harvest to the cover crop. And that was just 7 days of sunlight. This is a series of slides that was spring barley mixed with cereal rye into silage corn again. Now this is a different environment. This is up in Outagamie County, 30-inch rows. Plants are not nearly as tall. Plant population is a lot less. The soil just doesn't support that same kind of environment that we just went through. This was 7 days after harvest, and again, you can see these seeds here are sprouted. You can see the roots are super shallow. In fact, they're actually on the surface of the soil. And these plants are trying to get to sunlight, right? This was 7 days after harvest. I'm sorry, this is 7 days after seeding. This photo is taken 14 days after seeding. So this is about the time I want to see the silage get harvested, right? And everything looks pretty good, but the plants are starting to lay down just a little bit. Note how green these leaves are. That plant is still very green. Now we're 21 days after seeding. No sign of the chopper, right? So I'm getting nervous, but what I noticed is, look what's happening. This is still green, but we're actually starting to get those leaves to fall. That plant is actually starting to die. We are getting some sunlight into that canopy so that it's not actually getting killed. And that saved this. This was actually 30 days after planting. And it turned out beautiful. But in this situation, this turned out so good because we just had, the corn itself just there wasn't as much there. Wider rows, smaller plant, just less overall vegetation. And we started to get some sunlight penetration just from the natural. Actually, I think what got that field was we had a pretty hard frost on about day 20. And I think that knocked the corn back enough to get a little sunlight in. All right, so we're kind of reviewing where we're at this point, right? So we picked the right seed. We put the seed out at the correct time. Should grow, right? Nothing else to know about this. Well, we've learned the hard way that there's more to it than this. This is something that we've discovered. We saw it about 4 years ago, but weren't really sure what it is we were seeing. And what it is there are predators in your field that will destroy your stand when you broadcast these seeds. The first predator, and I put it in the predatory category, and if you have these, this is not a bad thing, but this is something that happens. Earthworms will come out of their burrows, get out on the surface, and they will gather that seed up, bring some of it into the burrows, and a lot of it right around the entrance of their burrows. I've had growers where I go out and do the application and they don't walk the field immediately after I do it, right? So they didn't get to see that the seed was scattered in a uniform manner. They come out about a week later and they've got clumps of grass with all kinds of blades of grass coming out of one spot. And then there's, like 10 inches this way is another clump of grass. And over here is another clump of grass. so I'll ask, I'm like, can you tell, is it at the entrance of these earthworm burrows? And you can tell those because they're little residue piles where the earthworms have gathered the residue into that area. You can actually see some of their deposits, and there's the clump. Well, what's happened is those earthworms have come out and they've brought the seed into that area, and they've brought some seed down through their earthworm channel. And this is actually a cereal rye seed at the bottom of an earthworm channel that has germinated. And that cereal rye seed is still trying to find the surface of the soil because it was basically planted by that earthworm 4 inches deep. So what I've had happen frequently is I go out and I plant it, meaning I broadcast these cereal rye seeds, right? And it's now November 15th, and the grower's like, where's my cover crop? There is nothing here. And I used to think, I have no idea, did the herbicide get it? What happened? I mean, I have no idea. I mean, I know where I put the seed was put here, I don't know what happened. And then you call the guy real sheepishly in August, because you're wondering if he'd like to try it again. And you're like, I'm just kind of curious how things turned out. Because, we talked in November and it was not very good. He's like, boy, you wouldn't believe it. He says, come spring, it was beautiful. I mean, I had rye just growing up. It was absolutely gorgeous. And I'm trying to figure out, now how on earth do we not have a stand in November, and then we have this stand the guy is really proud of in April? What is happening here? And it was when we went out and started digging around. These rye seeds don't die trying to find the soil surface. They go dormant in the soil, and come spring, they eventually find the surface and get some sun and start to grow. Well, if you wanted an overwintering cover crop, you probably wanted it for spring erosion control. That would probably be one of the reasons why you wanted that. Well, it's accomplished that mission. That would be something that we could consider successful. Would you ever do anything to control earthworms? Absolutely not. I mean, earthworms are extremely critical. This photo right down here is another cereal rye seed brought into an earthworm channel. And I can't control that, right? Just know that this is something